So, John, are you suffering bad air quality from the Big Island or not?
No, ironically not. We are about 100 miles away, and typically the trade winds will blow things toward the Big Island, not away. So as long as the trades keep blowing, we're safe here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
As soon as they stop, the air becomes very foggy, very kind of like we call it VOG, which is volcanic fog, basically, and it's very bad for your lungs, apparently.
Yeah. Well, Peter doesn't have to worry because he's in Minneapolis right now. But
that's right.
But his girlfriend certainly has a lot to worry about. So his wife.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't volcanic ash include sulfuric acid? Is that what's in?
It does, yeah. As soon as it hits your lungs, I guess it converts one of the things to acid in your lungs. So it's particularly bad stuff, and that's why the property values tend to be less in that area, as you can imagine.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, Peter was telling me that the global warming is kind of reversing the pattern of the trade winds, so that you're getting much more of the bad air coming towards you than used to be.
Yeah, that's one of the really sad aspects of global warming. It will slow down the circle of the Arctic currents, and the Arctic air currents here just make it a very beautiful place to live. But when they stop, the fog from the Big Island comes floating our way, and it makes it hazy and coughing. And yeah, you're right. So we gotta do something about that.
Okay. All right.
Is your recording button red?
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like we're both recording.
Okay.
Cool.
And we have a couple of people on the phone.
Yes, sir, we do. Anyone like to identify themselves? Who's on the telephone?
Don Price.
Okay.
I don't know who's showing up. It's Larry Fish. I'm on my smartphone. I think I'm logged in through the net.
Yeah, you are. We see you.
Yeah.
Larry, we see you as with your own name. And then we have one other person on the telephone.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Sylvester.
Always nice to hear from Sylvester.
Okay.
It would be nice if I could see you guys.
One day. One of these days we'll get you set up so you can come in on your computer and you can see us all, Sylvester.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Okay. So we'll just gather for a couple more minutes and see if anybody new arrives. So we got mid-90s here today, Dennis and myself. Probably a little warmer by Dennis than it is here.
I think I heard, Rick, that Tucson reached 100 degrees sometime this month.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier than it has ever reached 100 degrees.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Yeah. Is that true, Mr. Correa? You must
yes, it is. We had ice out on the Santa Cruz River about a week ago when it hit the 100 mark.
All right.
That's what the locals refer to it, is that the ice melts on the Santa Cruz River.
you see it? Do you guys see a trend over the last 5 years? I mean, do you feel warming effects?
I do. It's been slightly. Last summer was a long, hot one, longer than what it had been in the past, and I think we broke some new high temp records, like 115 or something like that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's because I got here. It was a world for me. No, we're usually about 2 to 3 degrees cooler here than in Tucson. So, but it was 100 last week. It was 100, 101 here last week.
Oh, yep.
I actually know what day it was. It was last Tuesday because I did too much exercise and kind of wiped myself out. So
It's not much better here. It's 88 here to right now.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yes, and extremely humid right now.
Ugh. Wee, that's horrible.
Well, that's typical Maryland. It's, you know, either nasty or hot, one of the two.
Yeah. Ooh. 88 and humid is yucky.
It's about 70 degrees here in Boulder, no humidity.
Nice.
Nice.
Just saying.
Thanks a lot, Don, for bragging.
A few things that I can brag about, so every opportunity I get to come up with something. Because normally we're snowed in, you know, so it's there. You know, it's like, oh, it's 30 degrees in Maryland, or, you know, friggin' Rick in Tucson, and here it's, you know, 10 degrees. So
True. Yeah, we seldom here in Maryland. We seldom get, you know, below 20.
yeah, I used to live in Annapolis for about 10 years.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So somebody's making an awful lot of noise. John Appler, can you kind of mute yourself? We're hearing like
Yes, sure will.
we're hearing a scratching noise or something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, there's Len.
Hey guys,
Oh, hello.
we just had a severe thunderstorm roll through here. I had to batten down the hatches.
Oh, okay. That's got to be something to do with that 88-degree weather in Maryland, I would think. Then.
Yeah, it was very hot.
Yeah.
I got a message when a little while ago on my computer, since I've been spending a lot of time in Boston lately. It's hooked up to the weather service in Boston, and they had tornado watches covering a good part of Massachusetts. So,
Wow.
Yeah, Mass and Connecticut. Matter of fact, thunder's still rolling around out there right now, although most of it's, the worst is done.
Oh yeah, we can hear.
Can you?
Yeah, unless it's Joanne downstairs with a sheet of metal that she's shaking back and forth.
Sound effects expert.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Oh, geez, what's happened now? My go-to meeting box is frozen. Oh, that means my computer is freezing. Well, can you guys all hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, well,
Oh, now he's frozen.
Yeah, now we don't hear you, or we see you frozen and we don't hear you. I guess you're in charge, Len, until he can reboot his computer.
All right. Did you do the head count, Jake?
No, not yet. Rick probably did, but we didn't need to do it out loud.
Okay.
Oh, there he's back. Rick is back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. It just
The video is still frozen.
well, I haven't turned the video back on, so let's see what happens.
Okay.
Let's see what happens when I turn the video back on. It may come back. All right, we'll get cracking anyway, and there you go.
There you go.
Okay, so let me make sure I've got everybody down here. I think I do. We got Jake, John Appler, Dennis Correa, Rich Jackson, Larry Fish, Professor Bill, Ken Anderson, Don Price, Sylvester, and Len. Anyone else?
Rich just left. He sent us a note. He's going to a US2 meeting tonight.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now, so we don't have Rich. He's not with us going forward. Okay. There's a couple of other people I think may join. At least they said they were going to join, but we'll see. So let me go down the list and see who would like some time, and then we'll figure out where we go from there. Jake, how about you?
No, I don't have anything, Rick.
No? Okay. John Appler, anything for you?
I'm fine, Rick. Thanks.
You sure? Because then we lose you. You leave, and then I feel badly that I haven't had a chance to check in with you. No,
I'm very. I'm anxious to hear Professor Bill's update in particular. So no, I'm great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Larry, anything for you?
I can do like 1 or 2 minutes on definition from my visit about some definitions.
Sure. You may be able to have more than 1 or 2 minutes. Professor Bill, we know that you've got something. And Don Price, we know that you've got something because you gave me a heads up. Ken, anything for you today?
Nope, just at work listening in.
Okay. And Sylvester, anything for you?
No, not this time. Thanks, Rick.
Okay. Len, anything for you?
No, sir. Thank you.
Boy, it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. We had to go 40 minutes over. Oh, and I do apologize to everybody that we couldn't offer you the recording last time. It was a screw up on the part of GoToMeeting, which hopefully is now sorted out. But it was a good meeting last week, and there was a lot. We had a lot of people, and a lot of people wanted to speak, and so it looks like we're going to have plenty of time today. Speaking of the recordings, anybody is not comfortable with the recording, they should let me know ahead of time, and then I will just be sure to be more circumspect in identifying them or talking about them or what have you. Because you know, we tell everybody that we record on here, but we don't mention it before we start every recording. And some people are not as comfortable as others, but it's not something that we're going to change because it proves to be very useful, not just for those who missed the call, but I know some of you like to go back and listen to what was said during the call. So we're not going to change that, but we can certainly do a better job for those people who aren't super comfortable having a recording on the net. Okay, why don't we'll start with Bill, and then we'll go on to Don Price, and then Larry. So Bill, I know that there's been a heck of a lot going on, so why don't you fill us all in?
Okay, so I'm going to go into some detail so that some of you guys can give me some feedback on what you think about the decisions that I've made, and also so everybody else can understand why I decided to do what I'm doing. So my PSA is rocketing upwards. The doubling time is about 3 weeks. So the olaparib, the PARP inhibitor I've been taking, is clearly not working nearly as effective as it was. Somewhere around March 1st, I began to take Keytruda or pembrolizumab, the immunotherapy, despite the fact that it's not. I don't know if any of you saw the article in the New York Times last week about how this drug is working miracles in other types of cancer that have high mutation burden in tumors, but it doesn't work as well in prostate cancer. But we figured it might be worth a try because I have this BRCA mutation that theoretically should make me hypermutagenic, so, or my cells. So we tried it, and if you look at a plot of my PSA, there's no deviation from what the rate at which it was climbing earlier. I also, about 2 weeks ago, I think, or perhaps even a little bit longer, went to Dana-Farber. Actually, I had a consult at Dana-Farber about at the beginning of March, and talked to a fellow named Atish Chowdhury, who is in addition to being an oncologist, has a research program that involves DNA repair. So we speak the same language, and he had recommended at the time that I consider a clinical trial, and I'll say a little bit more about it in a minute. But I decided at that point, my oncologist in Buffalo was pushing me hard to at least try the Keytruda, and so I went in that direction at that point. So when it became apparent that the Keytruda wasn't working, I went back to Boston and had a Axeman scan. Back in January, I had just a couple of lesions, metastatic lesions on my ribs, but everything else was pretty much gone thanks to the olaparib, and that's was a big improvement from right before I started olaparib. I had a number of metastatic lesions. The scan, the Axeman scan that I had a couple of weeks ago, indicated though that there were just too many metastases to count in throughout my skeletal system, my ribs, my spine, my skull, one of my femurs, and it also detected some visceral mets in my lungs, which we thought might be related to, when I was a kid, I had tuberculosis, and I had had a couple of lesions in my lungs for a long time that seemed to be benign, that we attributed to TB, but and apparently those TB-related lesions can take up amino acids, which is the basis for the scan, similar to tumor cells. But after the radiologist compared scans from the past with this most recent scan, it was pretty clear that these lesions are now growing, in addition to taking up the labeled amino acid Axeman. So, so this is, basically things are really headed south in a big way. So what am I going to do? I've decided to enter this clinical trial that my oncologist at Dana-Farber, who will now become my primary oncologist, had told me about earlier. It's a trial that tests the efficacy, so it's a phase 2 trial, of a drug called AZD 6738, which is an inhibitor of a protein called ATR, or ataxia-telangiectasia related. So ATR is an important protein in a DNA damage response pathway, and I don't want to give a long lecture about it, but it plays a key role in another pathway, genetic pathway, that my laboratory discovered in 2003. We were the first ones to publish on this pathway. And so part of the theory about why inhibiting ATR might kill cancer cells is that there are these pathways that keep cells that are replicating their DNA from prematurely going into mitosis by sensing whether or not there are, chromosomes are replicating. So that's a pathway we discovered. And there's a second redundant pathway that does the same thing, that depends on a different protein called P53, which I think most of you guys are familiar with. And in normal cells, P53 is intact. And so the P53 dependent pathway keeps cells that are replicating their DNA from going through mitosis as a part of cell division. And because if they do go through mitosis without finishing replication of their chromosomes, the chromosomes fragment and the cells die. But in tumor cells, the P53 pathway very, very frequently is mutated. And so now both of these parallel pathways are mutated. And if you knock out the ATR dependent pathway that we discovered, then there is nothing to restrain cells from going through this premature mitosis and dying. So to make a long story short, I think the underlying hypothesis of this trial is really strong. And, it's a long shot. But right now, I don't have too many other options. I think my only other option really is to have cytotoxic chemotherapy, probably carboplatin, which I haven't had before. But I'm trying very hard to avoid it because I'm still trying to work as a scientist, and I think it would be, I'm worried that it would be so debilitating that I wouldn't be able to do that. So at this point, I had a biopsy a couple of days ago of a lymph node that now is full of tumor, and the material is going to be sequenced, and the specific information they're going to get is from a panel of about 500 genes that are related to cancer that has been developed at Dana-Farber, and we'll see, what other mutations there might be in these genes that could be actionable if this trial doesn't work. And it also will tell us what the mutation burden is in my metastatic lesions, which, will perhaps suggest that, especially if the pathologists see that there are immune system cells infiltrating the tumor, together that would suggest that the Keytruda, in fact, might be working. I forgot to say that there's a debate between my two oncologists about whether I should have withdrawn from Keytruda. My oncologist at Roswell Park here in Buffalo thinks it was a mistake. I'm absolutely convinced that he's wrong and that the Keytruda is not working. Partly on the basis of a phone call that I received out of nowhere from a really well-known molecular biologist in Colorado over the weekend who had heard my story and wanted to put his 2 cents in. So I had the biopsy. I'll get the results of the sequencing and the pathology in about 2 weeks to put a rush on it. I'm scheduled to have the pretrial workup, so a bunch of scans, MRIs, CT scans, and blood work on May 22nd. And if all goes well there, I'll enter the trial on May 30th. I think the only potential problem will be my hemoglobin needs to be above 10. I think it's 10 grams per deciliter. And mine has been running a little bit below that. But I think I had to stop taking the olaparib on May 1st so that it could wash out of my circulatory system before I started the trial. And so I think without the olaparib, my hemoglobin probably isn't going to be as depressed. But if it is, then the plan is to have a blood transfusion to get me into the trial. So that's where we stand. And it's been an interesting couple of weeks, including the day that after the scan, I went to visit the State House in Boston and set off their metal detector because I was still radioactive. It took a lot of explaining, but they did finally let me in. So I got to, hang out in the gallery and watch the representatives in the Massachusetts State House doing the people's business, which they appear to be doing, I have to say, in a much better way than they do in Washington, D.C. But
that's a pretty low bar there, Bill.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So, I mean, I don't. It's been a tough decision whether or not to leave the Keytruda behind, and we're all very surprised that it didn't work because theoretically my tumor should have a high mutation burden, and that's the key thing. One of the two key things that determines efficacy for Keytruda. The other being that the immune system needs to infiltrate the tumors. So,
what about MSI, Bill? What about I thought microsatellite instability was a big factor for.
Yeah, but you're right. And I'll also learn what my status is in that regard from the sequencing. But that's really just another measure of mutation burden. It's a particular type of mutation. And so, for patients that haven't had a large panels of genes screened, MSI can give them similar information.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm glad you raised that issue because that's something that's important. So I don't know. That's the other reason why we're surprised. I have a mutation in a protein called MLH1, which is involved in a process called mismatch repair. This is a different mutation than the BRCA2 mutation. And mismatch repair defects is what causes microsatellite instability. So we're really, really puzzled why the Keytruda is not working. And part of the problem here is that there's not a large database of information from prostate cancer patients in particular. And I'm aware of only 3 patients in the literature that have been studied, followed, taking this drug and published on where it worked. That was a small clinical trial of 10 patients. And 7 of them, it didn't work, and 3 it did. But in the 3 that it did work, it was almost immediately apparent that it was stopping progression. And I've been through 3 rounds of Keytruda now, and without any evidence that it's doing anything.
Is it, Bill, this is Jake. Is it possible that the olaparib and the Keytruda were canceling themselves out?
No, and I'm glad you asked, Jake. No, they should be synergistic, actually. Okay. And what I forgot to say is that this trial is not only testing the efficacy of this ATR inhibitor, it's more specifically, it's asking whether or not it will potentiate the effects of olaparib. And it should, theoretically. So even though I had to go off olaparib to get on the trial, just so that we're starting from the same place that every other patient in the trial was starting from, because not all of them have been taking olaparib. But once I go on the trial on May 30th, I'll start taking it again. Okay. And the very specific question that the trial is asking is whether or not it will potentiate the effects of olaparib. So thanks for asking that question.
Well, that's interesting. So in other words, you're going to be sort of a special member of this trial because you'll be taking the PARP inhibitor. Is there anyone else on the trial so far that's on a PARP inhibitor?
Everybody will be.
Everybody will be.
Everybody, yeah. But, you know, and most of the other patients will have not been exposed to olaparib before.
Ah, okay.
Or other PARP inhibitors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
my big regret is that the inhibitor that they chose for this trial is olaparib, and not a newer generation PARP inhibitor. And you know, when you look at the kill curves for these newer ones in tissue culture cells, it's, you know, they're 2 or 3 logs more potent at killing tumor cells compared to normal cells. And I would love to get access. Rick and I, and I think Glenn too, and have been talking about this, but it's it's difficult.
Yeah.
Bill, were there any side effects from the Keytruda that prompted your Dana-Farber oncologist to want you to stop?
No, none at all. It was purely on the basis of his estimation that it was not working, based on my PSA and the fact that it is continuing to rise at the same rapid rate, and on the basis of the scan, which compared to a scan not too long before I went on Keytruda, showed, you know, far fewer lesions. So that's why he, you know, he's arguing for the trial instead of staying on Keytruda.
Mm-hmm.
I should also say that he pointed out we had a long Atish, my oncologist at Dana-Farber, and I had a long talk yesterday on the phone because of some of the issues that my new friend in Colorado raised in his phone call over the weekend. Mm-hmm. And he reinforced his thinking that Keytruda isn't going to work. And he said something else that I was going to tell you, and now it slipped my mind, but it was important. What was it?
Did you share with Chowdhury your lab's research?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And what did he say about that?
I don't know. He was interested.
He was interested.
Yeah, he didn't. He actually didn't know some of the underlying biology.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, which is not surprising. I mean, these are, you know, they're pretty esoteric things.
Okay.
But I'm, you know, once I know for sure that I'm going to be in the trial, and you know that means after the next week's pre-screen, if I, you know, pass those tests, I'm going to get in touch with the PI for the trial, who's at Yale, and explain my background.
All right.
Yeah.
So for those of you who may not recall or never knew, this is the second time this has happened to Bill, that he's on a drug that he had a hand in researching originally, which is absolutely remarkable and synchronistic.
It is. It really is. Yeah. I'm trying very hard. I mean, I'm, you know, I also had a long meeting today with my last postdoc, and, you know, we're wrapping up the project we've been working on for the last couple of years, and I'm going to shut down my lab this summer. One of the things, so I need to write up a paper describing this work that we did more recently. But once that's out of the way, I'm going to go back to writing a book about my experience as a cancer scientist and a cancer patient.
Great idea.
It's not my idea. You have no idea how many people have told me that I should write this book.
Yeah.
But I think I do. I agree. I think it is a good idea.
You know, I think maybe you should keep working as a scientist, because maybe you'll discover something you could use in a couple of years, Bill.
No, I wish. I really wish. I can't. But it's also the conflict that, you know, my research actually now is much more basic than it was back in 2003. I mean, back in 2003, I was, you know, working directly with human cells, tumor cells. And then, you know, there was NIH, National Institute of Health, was pushing for mammalian geneticists and cell biologists to go into yeast research. Yeast is a phenomenally useful organism for doing genetics. And I bought it, hook, line, and sinker. And so I switched to working with yeast. And, but what, you know, so it's valuable. It, you know, the genetic pathways in yeast are highly conserved. I mean, all the mechanics of cell division that underlie basic cancer biology were established in yeast. But it's also far removed from drug development. You know, not as much as it used to be. And I did, you know, I have done drug screens using yeast, but, you know, it's much less of a chance that I would develop a drug that I could use over the next couple of years doing yeast experiments.
So does anybody else have any specific questions for Bill about the trial or his experiences, or the lymph node biopsy? If so, we've got a bunch of new people that have joined who I plan to welcome before we go on to Don Price. But if so, now is the time to ask him. How about John Appler, who wanted to listen, who wanted to hear Bill's experiences?
Yeah, it's fascinating, Bill, and you've helped so many people, you know, that we just all listen to your story with such amazement that you have gone through this. We can't wait for the book, quite frankly. I was also very interested in about your fellow researcher who heard about your story and contacted you, and I think that's a wonderful thing that could happen in the future. Was there a way that your case became more publicly known through someone's database, or how did that happenstance call happen to you? Was it a personal relationship, Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm becoming, well, first of all, there was a story, a short story about my case in the New York Times a couple of years ago. And so, and a lot of my science colleagues read that and know about it. And so, you know, it's getting, the story is getting known. But the connection specifically was made by a good friend of mine. And I want to talk about this in the future sometime. This guy is also a yeast researcher, but he has developed a phenomenal tool for testing drugs. And so he started a company, and he's, you know, trying to finance it. And he somehow made contact with this guy in Colorado. His name is Larry Gold. He's at the University of Colorado. And Larry is, he's a member of the National Academy. He's made tons of money from his inventions. You know, he's dedicated his life to developing tools for helping, you know, cancer patients. So my friend Gennaro with the yeast company was talking to him on the phone on Saturday, and he told Larry that I was going to stop taking Keytruda. It turns out Larry, someone close to Larry, was recently diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and they're on Keytruda, you know, beginning about 2 weeks ago. I really hope it works. And so when he heard Gennaro tell him about me, I have to also tell you that there's a photo of me on the first slide of Gennaro's pitch deck that he, you know, for the talks he gives to potential investors. And so Larry had known about me through that too, because he had a bunch of details of my case. And so Larry told Gennaro to hang up and call me and tell me to, he told Gennaro to give me Larry's phone number and to tell me to call him right away because he was concerned about dropping Keytruda. He knows he's a really smart guy. He knows a lot. And it turned out he just didn't know enough specifics about my case. So for example, he thought that I was dropping Keytruda solely on the basis of the PSA rise without understanding that, you know, it was on the basis of scan results too. But it was quite an experience. We have become very, very good friends just in the last couple of days. I never knew this. I had heard of him, actually. I'd heard him talk in the past, but we had some very intense conversations over the weekend about lots of things in addition to cancer. He's a great guy.
But I have an important question for you about him. It's a question that would concern myself and Buzz. Since he lives in Colorado, does he know how to stack wood?
I don't know.
That's a personal joke. That's a personal joke.
That's a personal joke. My older brother, who was the responsible adult that came to retrieve me from Dana-Farber after my biopsy, came down from Vermont, is always razzing me about how I need to stack more wood. He lives in this fantastic house. Rick has been there. That he heats entirely with wood. So stacking wood is very, very important in the life of many Vermonters.
And you only get invited to the house if you know how to stack wood, right? Correct, Bill?
Right, that's right.
Anyway, listen, let's
before you go on, Rick, I'm sorry, before you go on, just let me say that if anybody thinks of any questions, feel free to email me or give me a call. And, you know, I really know the ins and outs now of pembrolizumab, Keytruda. And if that's something that you're considering in the future and, you know, and you think that I might be able to help you make a decision, you know, I think it's a miraculous drug for many, many people. And I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck, Bill.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yes, indeed.
So let me just check in with the 4 new people that I see that that joined us while Professor Bill was talking. Brian Heise in Chicago, how are you? Do you have anything you'd like to talk about today?
I'm good, and no, I don't have anything to talk about today. Thanks for asking.
Okay. How about Dan and Gigi in Newport? Anything for you to discuss today? You're muted, so maybe you need to unmute to tell us. Okay.
You can now. Okay, it was hard to click it.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan just got back from his appointment, and
San Francisco.
he had his labs, and the only quick question is, his PSA is still undetectable, but his testosterone has risen from 17.
So we'll come back to you. I just want to check in so I can do my timing. But the answer is yes, you need to fill us in, and you've got a question on,
okay.
on the testosterone.
Thanks. Okay.
No problem. Eric, anything for you today?
No. Well, yeah, I got one thing.
Okay. And George, Dr. George, would you like to take a little time if we have some for you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. So I like to listen tonight, but if you have some time later, I can talk a little bit.
Great. Okay. Super. So Don Price sent me a note, and if you do give me a heads up that you have something on your mind, I will always try and elevate you closer to the top of the list. So Don has some concerns about maintaining bone density, and Don, why don't you speak to that?
Okay, thanks, Rick. So density, and what I'm after is just to see what everybody else may be doing in terms of maintaining bone density. So so my background was 18 months on Firmagon, so obviously no testosterone. And during those 18 months was taking Fosamax and had, and you know, exercise, weights, minerals, and so, you know, roughly a year into those 18 months had a DEXA scan, and it was just fine. I mean, my, the T-score, which is a measure of what your density is compared to actually young males, was greater than 0. So you know, you can have a T-score like of +1, and that's 1 standard deviation above the median, or -1. So mine was 0.2, so a little bit above the median for young males. So everything's fine. Finished up the Firmagon at 18 months. Took 9 more months for testosterone to become measurable. And then it's been, even after measurable, it stayed fairly low. Within the, finally got back up to the standard range, but at the very low end of the standard range. When I stopped Firmagon, I also stopped Fosamax, which in retrospect may or may not have been a mistake. I see an oncologist in Marina del Rey, Mark Schultz, who suggested actually that I have a carotid artery scan, you know, just because he said everybody should have a carotid artery scan. And so I signed up for one of those package deals. And as part of the package deal, they do an ultrasound of your kneecap. And that came in at high risk for osteoporosis. So took that to the GP, general practitioner. We did another DEXA scan, and it had actually gone way down in the, you know, whatever it was, couple of years since I stopped the Fosamax, and was now in the, you know, the greater than -1, so greater than 1 standard deviation below the median for a young adult. So, and at about the same time, I also needed to have some oral surgery, you know, and the oral surgeon, of course, is advising me that Fosamax and similar medications, you know, there's roughly a 0.5% chance that you have jaw necrosis because of that. And so some of your jawbone dies typically while you're having oral surgery. So, and also from my other readings, you know, I had seen that, for example, there are other treatments other than Fosamax. And so just curious as to what other people may be doing to maintain bone mineral density. Anybody?
Well, I'd like to talk about that.
This is Bill. I also have a problem with bone density, and I take CalCarb, calcium. You know, it's a tablet that contains both calcium and vitamin D, and both of those things are really important for maintaining bone density. So I think there are other medications that you can take that are, you know, more esoteric, but I would recommend that as a good place to start.
Okay.
Anyone else? Jake, what are you taking?
Well, you know, I take Zometa or zoledronic acid, and like Bill, I also take a calcium vitamin D tablet every day.
And how's your bone density holding out?
I've never had it tested, to be honest.
Well, I think many of you know my own story, which was actually really positive, which was that when I got diagnosed, because they were prescribing more than 2 years worth of ADT, they did a bone density test, and it turned out that I was minus 2.4 in my spine, which is borderline osteoporosis, as opposed to osteopenia, which is from -1 to -2.5. And I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I was really surprised. And then I started thinking about it, and I know my sister has issues. I know that my dad shrunk a lot in his 60s, and I know that I have very high calcium levels, serum calcium levels. So it seems like calcium leaches into my blood. And so they gave me 3 infusions of Zometa annually, one right at the beginning, one after the first year, and one after the second year. And I also changed my exercise routine to do more stress-bearing weight resistance exercises, particularly those that affected my spine. Spine's kind of a hard area in your body to find exercises to do. So what I was doing was squats with weights on my shoulders, on a bar that I had on my shoulders, and certain other exercises that people showed me. And the good news was that within 3 years, my bone density in my spine had improved from -2.4 to -1.0, or maybe it was even 0.9. And I haven't measured my bone density now in several years. So what I learned from that is that I think that clearly the bisphosphonates or the similar drugs, a class of drugs that denosumab is in, can make a difference. But also, you can make a difference yourself by doing plenty of weight-bearing exercise. Well, I think you can. I mean, if it were me again, and that I would be doing it again, and I'd recommend anybody else try it and see if they can make a difference. But I do think the weight-bearing exercise definitely helps.
I think there's a lot
What's
of
optimal, Rick?
Bill first, and then I think it was John.
There's a lot of evidence in the literature that weight-bearing exercises will improve bone density.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I meant to say that too, but it sounds like who I can't remember who was that. Who were you talking with now?
Don Price.
Huh?
Don Price.
Tom Price, yeah. But Tom, it sounds like you're already doing exercises anyway, right?
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, I agree with Rick, and
and then was that you, John? Wanted to say something?
Yeah. Quick question, Rick. What's the number of times they're optimal for the weight-bearing resistance per week? And do we have an expert within our community here who could help people like all this with the optimizing a weight program?
Right. So probably 3 times a week is the ideal, every other day, in terms of weight bearing. And to move those and to move the areas that you're doing around. So you're probably not using weight bearing on any one group of bones or muscles more than 1.5 times a week at most. And in terms of expertise, I think any of us could write to Donna Wilson. She'd be more than happy to give you her thoughts, and she is the expert. That's the lady who did the Keep Moving. And I'd listen to that I'd go back and listen to that again, because I know she talks about weight resistance in there. But Donna Wilson is definitely one source, and she's always do have questions. Either I can connect you or Len can connect you. Len attends her class, as does Richard Foodie, and so we have access to her, and we can certainly ask her. In terms of what exact exercises to do, I think any instructor is probably going to be knowledgeable enough to suggest, what if you tell them which muscle groups and bones you want to stress. So, for example, if you want to put stress on your spine, if you want to put stress on your hips, they're going to be able to come up with an exercise program for you. The other thing is that there are certifications. So, for example, the American College of Sports Medicine offers a certification in cancer, in exercise for cancer patients. And if you can go onto their website and you can search on that website in your area for any trainers that might have that expertise. I mean, I'm aware of trainers certainly in certain parts of the country. I know somebody in Jersey. I know a couple of people in Northern California. The thing is, I don't like to bother them too much because, their time is valuable, and I don't think it's fair. So I would say the first thing to do is see if you can find somebody locally who has expertise in training people living with cancer.
Got it. Thanks, Rick.
So that's the American College of Sports Medicine, and if you look for the cancer, if you can't find it, let me know, I'll help you. But if you look for their cancer program, and I'm almost certain now they list graduates who have that qualification, and you'll see if there's anybody on Maui.
Great. Thanks, man.
Anyone else for Don? Any other suggestions for Don?
Yeah, Rick, I'd like to caution Don about that reported incidence of osteonecrosis of the jaw, ONJ. It's probably considerably higher than just 0.5%. In my local prostate cancer support group, we have a group of about 25 guys. 3 of them have some degree of ONJ, and none of them had dental procedures while on, the bisphosphonates or the rankle inhibitors. So, the drug manufacturers like to underestimate the incidence of some serious side effects. So just a cautionary note.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Don, any follow-up on your part before we move on?
I don't think, well, the only thing I would say is, again, it was just by chance that I had this follow-up DEXA scan. And so, for anybody that has no to low testosterone, it's probably not a bad investment to just have it checked just to see, because the last thing you'd want would be a positive outcome with prostate cancer, but then fall and break a hip and, die from that.
Right. Okay, yeah, I mean, definitely anyone who's, I'll come back to you, anyone who has been on long-term ADT and is not on a bone strengthener like Caregivers or Prolia or Zometa, you should definitely get your bone density tested at least once every couple of years. If not once a year. Normally they won't do it once a year unless it's a situation where you're known to have a weakness and you're taking drugs like I was. It doesn't change that radically for most people. It did for me. I mean, I saw it going down. I think I went from minus 2.4 to minus 1.8 at the end of the first year, and then minus 1.3. So, but Don's advice to know your bone density is pretty good, but you don't normally need to do it every year. Okay. Somebody joined us by telephone in the last 5 minutes or so whilst Don was speaking. Would you like to tell us who that is?
Yeah, Paul Frieda, F-R-E-D-A.
Paul Frieda, did you say?
Yeah, Paul Frieda joined you with the telephone. First
Hello,
time I'm using the telephone.
Okay, and is there anything you would like to talk about today?
No, I'll pass tonight.
Okay, so let's move on to Larry Fish.
Oh, wait a minute. Where's the mute? Got me?
We got you. We've always got you, Larry.
I mean, verbally. Orally speaking.
Okay, okay.
Just I wanted to follow up on a question I posed that I took to my doctor. Sort of arose in my mind after the release of the FDA approval for apalutamide, when it was talking about it was for a non-metastatic study that came out and FDA approved. And then we mentioned they don't usually do head-to-head studies, so there's no special reason to choose apalutamide over Xtandi or Zytiga or another option or not. But I was curious. It brought up the question of being curious about the definition of what is metastatic and what is castration resistant. Because I was a stage 4 metastatic when I started 3.5 years ago, whatever time, January probably, about 3.25 years. And last July, I had 3 small rises in my PSA while I was still on Lupron and Casodex, which defines as castration resistant. When in August we withdrew the Casodex, the PSA, which had gone up to 0.6, dropped back to 0.08, 0.1, 0.0. Well, it dropped slowly back towards 0.08 it went down to. And the question was, and the scans were clear, so the question is, well, I was metastatic, I was castration resistant by definition, but am I still metastatic and castration resistant, therefore not possibly a candidate for something like apalutamide? Now, I was looking not specifically at apalutamide, and I'm thinking about a little into the future, of the clinical trials that rotate between treatments. They have a couple of 2 or 3 major trials where you're on Zytiga, then you're on enzalutamide, then you're on abiraterone, then you're on chemo, either carbotoxyl or docetaxel, then you go back on enzalutamide, and then you go back on. So you get a hit for like 3 months or 6 months at a time, and they're rotating. So apalutamide can be part of one of those rotating studies. So that was interesting to me, is the kind of study that when you don't know exactly what works and what doesn't, that might be the kind of trial to look at. And my doctor said, which is the point is about just the simplistic definition. Terrible to follow Bill Burhan's with the in-depth versus the absolute superficial nature of what do they define your case as. But that aside, the doctor said that, well, once you're metastatic, you retain the definition of metastatic, even if it's not visible on scans because it's already happened. But in terms of if I'm still castration resistant, she said, I wouldn't call you castration resistant at this point, because for the last 6 months it's been fluctuating at 0.08, 1.0, 1.12, 0.08. She says that is not a characteristic of a castration resistant pattern. So she said that it was a tricky question, but that you retain your metastatic status, but you can go from being defined as castration resistant for trial purposes to not really being appropriate for a castration resistant trial definition of an inclusion. That's really the whole gist of what I wanted to say.
Nice. So questions from anybody? Thank you for pursuing that, and I think that's going to be helpful to a lot of people, especially when they're trying to figure out if they're eligible for certain drugs. Anybody have any questions for Larry on what he learned from talking to
Dr. Audi?
Dr. What's her name with an A?
AUTIO, audio, not audio, but audio.
I always forget her name.
Sloan.
Questions?
This is Jake. I think you made just like Dr. Bill Burhans did. You did a good job of explaining yourself. So very helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if Larry, if the reason why they're now considering you not castrate resistant is you said that your PSA dropped after you stopped taking Casodex, right?
Right, it dropped, and I'm just on Lupron now, which is...
Yeah, so, I mean, that...
how can they tell?
Because the Casodex is an analog of an androgen, but it doesn't, so it looks structurally, it looks like one, but when it binds to androgen receptors, it doesn't do what real androgens do. But sometimes there can be changes in tumor cells that make them capable of using Casodex as fuel, just like testosterone.
That's apparently what happened. I mean, that seems to be what happened.
So that means that your rise in PSA, was probably just sort of an artifact of the Casodex. And maybe that's why they're considering you now that it's gone back down again.
Yep.
Castrate is no longer castrate resistant. It's a question.
But it was tentatively no longer castrate resistant. It was as we watch, we'll keep an eye on what we wouldn't right now call you castration resistant.
Yeah, it's interesting. The other thing is, though, I think going to the metastatic lesions, I think that a lot of trials that are designed for patients who are metastatic specify the size of the metastatic lesion that qualifies you to get into the trial.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, so even though you're considered metastatic forever, you still might have trouble getting into a trial that's designed for metastatic patients.
I would just stop taking Lupron for 6 months. That would take care of that part.
I want
the Christmas tree would return.
That's right. I did know a guy. Some of us remember him, who actually took himself off of Lupron because he wanted to get Provenge, and it worked, and he did get the Provenge, And then he went back on the Lupron.
Are you talking about Lupron, Jim?
I am.
Yeah. Yes, he did do that.
That's pretty extreme, but I understand. I mean, you know, it's one of the paradoxical things about being a cancer patient. You know, that sometimes you have to make things worse. I mean, there was a time back a couple years ago when there was a trial that I really wanted to get into. It was before I was metastatic, but you had to be metastatic to get into it. And so I actually found myself hoping that, you know, my next scan would show that I was metastatic so I could get into the trial, which is, of course, just bizarre when you know, anyone who's not a cancer patient, you know, would think that was absolutely absurd.
Larry, this is Jake. Even though you don't wish to be metastatic, you may end up being metastatic again because the rebound effect from stopping Casodex is usually temporary. Some people it doesn't work at all. In your case, it did, which is fortunate, but it's usually a temporary response. So
yeah, Jake, I completely agree with that and understand. That's why I'm sort of looking at what am I going to think about 6 months from now.
Right. That's a hell of a thing to say. You know, you're kind of wishing you're metastatic so you can get on the trial, but you don't want to be metastatic. Or castrate-resistant, rather. You don't want to be castrate-resistant, yeah.
I'm not naive to think that it's not going to happen. I've been observing the patterns.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, though.
And I should just add quickly that my oncologist at the time, when I told him that I was hoping that they'd see a lesion, said he just said, no, we do not want to see a metastatic lesion.
Yeah. Okay. So unless we have anything more on this topic, we'll move on. Anything else? Okay. Dan and Gigi, tell us about your trip to California, your visit with Mac and anybody else, and what's on your mind?
Hello, this is Dan, and not Gigi.
Come on, Dan.
Yeah.
So we went out to California, yes, and saw Mac Roach, and we got a 3-month Lupron shot from.
You did.
I did, not we. Well.
Okay.
Anyway.
They were on strike.
They were on strike, and that kind of threw us for a loop a little bit, but we got blood drawn for later after we saw Dr. Roach. We got a PSA is low, undetectable, but the testosterone's rising, and I don't know why, and that's a question we have. And
we asked Dr. Roach through an email on the way home, you know, and we got kind of a non-answer. It was, you know, and so we just figured this is the best place to find out what could possibly be going on. One thing to note is that every time that he was on he's been on Lupron for a year. His last shot was a 6-month shot. So this was the end of a 6-month shot. And also every shot he's had from the beginning has always been 10 days to 2 weeks late. I've heard that it doesn't matter, but I don't know if you have to be like right on target. So if anybody can,
right.
If any clue, should we retest?
Right. So just tell us what level your testosterone was.
It was 17, and then it went up to 77, right?
No. It was this entire time. It's been 17 from just a few weeks after the first Lupron, and this most recent one was 44. And I've read that under 20 is like the perfect castrate number. I don't know.
Right. We'll allow Ken Anderson to address that because Ken's the expert when it comes to the perfect numbers. He's done the research, I happen to know. What did Mac? What was the waffle that Mac sent back to you?
He said because I asked about retesting. I asked four questions, of course, but he only answered the one about would it help to retest?
Yeah.
In a month, and he said, well, it depends where in the cycle you are. So I don't know what question he was answering.
Well, I think I know what he means. I think I can help you with that. So let me just try and explain that, and then we'll go to Ken, and then we'll go to anybody else who might have ideas on testosterone and Lupron. First of all, I mean, the Lupron does have a fair old half-life for most people. Not everybody, but for most people. So I don't know exactly what the half-life is, but when men come off of Lupron, it can take them quite a while to recover their testosterone. Usually the rule of thumb that I always heard, but I'm not sure how true it is that it takes double the amount of time to recover fully from your testosterone and to recover from the side effects as the amount of time you're on it. So if you were on for a year, it would take 2 years. I mean, in my own case, I can tell you that my testosterone came back to the levels that it was when I went on in about 6 months. But then the second year it dropped down for quite a long time, but then it came back again. And the other thing with testosterone that I do know is that it varies a lot, and a lot of it can depend on the time of day that you're testing. So it's not the most reliable test, and it varies. It varies a heck of a lot. I think what Mac was referring to is that if there is the cycle that he's referring to is that the testosterone works by overstimulating the testicles, and they start producing so much testosterone that they are overworked and they switch off. And I think that's also how it works with the production of other androgens in your body too. And in women, women who take Lupron, it overstimulates the ovaries and then they switch off. So what you might be thinking is that maybe for whatever reason, it did wear off a little early, and depending on where you are in the cycle of it restarting, you may still get a bum number. But if you waited 6 weeks or 8 weeks, you might get a reasonable number. So I think if it were me, I'd be less concerned about my testosterone and more concerned, especially given, and for those of you who don't know, and this is an important factor in responding. So Dan is on ADT as part of his primary initial treatment. He's not metastatic, but he required ADT as part of his original treatment. That was exactly the same situation for myself. So there are no lesions. There's no issue there. There's no issue of going on and off. This is all part of a treatment and question of how long he stays on it, etc., etc. So let me go over to Ken and talk about ideal levels.
Thank you.
Now, Rick, really, I'm sure I'm by no means an expert on testosterone level.
You've done the research. Come on, you've done that research. I know you have.
I have, no question, because it's one of those things that in my mind, if in fact we're doing ADT trying to keep our testosterone under control, if it fluctuates, it makes me nuts.
Right.
And I did, I've had a number of conversations with Paul Korn and MD Anderson about it, and he strongly encourages not doing more than 3 months, because that last month, in his mind, it's possible that it isn't as effective. So I would think, I would try to take advice and keep it to the 3-month shot. I'd wait 30 days and go back and then have it rechecked, but I wouldn't let it make you crazy.
Okay, thanks for the crazy thing, because we did decide to switch to a 3-month shot, though they kept saying it'd be so much more convenient for the 6. But I had this sneaky feeling, I don't know why, but that he should switch to the 3-month. So that's what
MD does think strongly, at least Paul Korn thinks strongly, that that is the best way to go about it. Either monthly or every 3 months, he said. I must admit, I did a 6-month shot when he had asked me not to, and I found my testosterone level doubled at the end of my 6-month period. My testosterone level was lower, but it still doubled, so.
Interesting.
I did go back on the 3-month shot, and I won't go anything else.
Great.
That's great. Thanks for that information. I certainly wasn't aware of that, and that's great information, and that could be an explanation. Now, we do know, what Ken didn't say, but I know he knows because we talked about it, is that, yes, ideally you want to be under 20, but under 50 is castrate level, and especially if you're not metastatic, I'm not sure it makes a huge difference. I think it probably makes a bigger difference if you're metastatic. But if you go over 50, then I would be concerned. But that would be how I see it. Go ahead.
Would that be unusual to see it over 50 on Lupron?
Yeah, it would.
After his radiation treatments?
Yeah, it would. It would mean that the Lupron isn't working, and it happens. And a lot of times what they'll do in that case is they'll switch you to a different ADT drug, either to Firmagon, which is thought to work a little better, or maybe to another agonist like Zoladex or Eligard. They'll switch you between them and see if you get a better response, and some people do.
Okay. And do you think that that is all well handled by a radiation oncologist to make those decisions, or would you, is?
Do I think? I mean, if you're talking about your radiation oncologist, I wouldn't be that concerned. I mean, I do think Mac has enough experience, and because I can talk about that personally, and I trust him.
To do a switcheroo, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, if it was somebody I didn't know and who wasn't in an academic environment, I might say, probably worth reaching out. But if it were me with Mac, I would trust him. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say about keeping testosterone levels low?
So this is Bill Burhans. The standard used to be 50 or below was considered to be castrate resistant. And sometime within the last couple of years, it was lowered to 20.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally, you want to keep it below 20. And I even if you're not metastatic, I think it's a good idea to shoot for that. So I was initially on 6 months shots, and I had the same problem. And I think it's important to keep in mind that part of the picture here is that these are depot injections. So the drug is encapsulated in a matrix that's injected along with the drug into your abdomen or fanny, whichever, depending on which type of leuprolide that you're being treated with. And so the matrix allows the drug to leach out into your circulatory system over a long period of time. But it's very difficult to control that. And so it could leak out faster than normal or usual, and you would run out of the drug before that 6-month period is up. And so I had that same problem with the 6-month shots, and we switched to 3-month shots, and that was about 4 years ago, and my testosterone has never risen above 20. So there's that information.
Good to know.
And it's because I think that it's less likely that this slow leaching of the drug into your circulatory system is going to, be fast enough so that you run out before the end of the time period. If Dan is getting them sometimes 1 or 2 weeks late, I think that could make a difference. I would try to, make sure that you get them right on the 3-month mark or before. And then finally, I also had a couple of years ago a spike. The only time that I did go above 20, one reading for some reason was 89. And I panicked. I thought that was it. I was resistant to leuprolide. And every reading after then has been below 20. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Certainly, I would predict that the next time you get a reading, it's going to be back down.
Thank you.
Thanks.
What did Mac have to say about how long you stay on this drug, Dan?
2 years. He didn't want to. I know that evidence is coming out that it can be shorter, but he's sticking to his guns. 2 years.
Okay.
For now.
Okay. And I bet you argued vociferously.
No.
Well, Gigi did at least.
No, I didn't. I actually think it's A-okay.
Okay. All right.
This is the big, this is the first.
You got, what did you say?
Chance.
You got to trust Dr.
Got to
Bush,
trust
Dr. Roach.
Trust his experience.
Yeah. Well, he did it for me, so I hope he's going to do it for you. So, okay. Anybody else like to say anything before we move on to Eric?
Just quickly, Rick, I agree with everything that you and Bill and Ken Anderson said. The only thing I would add is that studies have shown that Degarelix, trade name Firmagon, does control testosterone levels better than Lupron. So if Dan goes on the 3-month depot and still finds that his testosterone levels are erratic, might be a good idea to talk to your oncologist about Degarelix.
Okay. Thank you.
The trade-off is you do get an injection site reaction, and it's a monthly injection into your tummy, lower abdomen.
I started on Degarelix, and I was lucky. I didn't have that injection site reaction. So,
wow.
Make that.
You're one of the few I've ever heard say that, Bill.
Really?
Yeah, that's good.
It wasn't any more of a problem than the Elgard that I took after that.
Great.
Well, thanks everybody for that great explanations and the advice, because we'll follow that. Okay.
We're going to go to Eric, and I need to just, again, I'm having problems with my GoToMeeting, so I'm going to have to close it and come back on. So, Len, can you take over with Eric for his update, and I'll be back hopefully back in a moment.
Absolutely. See you later, Rick.
Okay.
Eric,
bye.
are you with us, Eric?
I'm here.
Okay. Would you like
hear
to? Yes, we can. Would you like to start?
Well, yeah. So my update is that that yesterday afternoon and yesterday evening and this morning, when I took my pills, about 15 minutes later, I threw everything up. And I've not had that problem before. And so, the question is it caused by one of the pills I'm taking or pills in general? I talked to the cancer center here in Berkeley, and the doctor there prescribed a sublingual Zofran. So I took that before I took my latest pills, and I did not get sick. But I just wonder if anyone else had any sort of similar reaction to taking pills. And of course, I take so many that isolating it down to which one is causing it's pretty hard. So.
Yeah. What were the different medications that you took the time you threw up?
As I said, it's about 25 altogether.
25 different medications or pills?
Different medications.
Oh, geez.
Wow.
I take 3 different steroids for my low blood pressure problem. I take calcium, potassium, and magnesium. I take, God, what are the other ones? Antacid, oh God. Anyway, that's just the start of the list. I could go get the list and read it all off to you. The common one is I take 250 milligram calcium citrate pills, and that's the only one that's really common to all the, to the afternoon, evening, and morning pills. But that seems like kind of an odd one to be causing me at this point to get sick. But as I say, it is the only common one. And the taking the sublingual Zofran did, or maybe I wasn't getting sick anyway. Now I don't know, unless I take it again without the pill, and then I can find out if that's what prevented my getting sick. But and these were very severe cases of throwing up. I mean, it wasn't like it was just a simple once and out. I mean, these were retching, painful, continuous episodes, would last 15, 20 minutes.
Oh, jeez.
So, I mean, it was really, whatever it is, it's really upsetting my stomach. So, I don't know, it's a new stage I've worked myself into. The endocrinologist, I think, has decided that the cancer has spread to my thyroid, because my thyroid completely quit working, just all of a sudden. So who knows what other organs are being chopped up as I go through the treatments. I already have Addison, so those aren't working. Anyway, that was the only update I had. What's that?
This only happened once, Eric? The retching?
No, 3 times in a row.
Oh.
Yesterday afternoon, yesterday evening, and this morning. Oh, but the sequence is only, yes. I had a couple of other incidences where I threw up, singly. Maybe in the past 3 weeks, I've had 2 or 3 other incidences, but this was the most continuous and the most extreme.
Eric, have you contacted your doctor?
I did. That's the one that gave me the Zofran, and he said that he'd schedule me for blood tests to see if something is out of whack.
Yeah, but what about?
Did he have any ideas about?
No.
which
No, he
medication?
just figured, like me, that it's one of them, but he didn't even want to speculate which one it was.
Eric?
I did have a problem when they first put me on the potassium. My potassium levels didn't come up very much, so they kept increasing my dose to the point where I was taking 80 microequivalents a day, and then I had continuous diarrhea. So they cut that back to 60, and that fixed that one. But, you know, it's sort of a experimental process to see what the right dosage level is.
Yeah.
I'm about to start a trial where I'm in the dosage determination stage too, so we're doing that with multiple things. This is the God, what's it called?
ES414.
Yeah, that's right, ES414, which is supposed to act like a middleman between the immune system and the cancer cells.
But let's just come back. Let's just come back to this sickness. So there was nothing unusual that you did that was different to the prior day or prior couple of days when you suddenly got this retching?
No.
So could it have been food related?
Oh yeah, I suppose it certainly could be. Although I waited about a half an hour after this morning's incident, and I ate some oatmeal, and I didn't get sick at all. I didn't get sick from that at all.
Yeah, but it could have been something. You could have eaten something bad. I mean, I know I've done that, and then you just retch like the blazes, and you know, for a while, sometimes for quite a long time. You just got to wait, and I'm just wondering if maybe you ate something bad, and it could be. I mean, I know it's oversimplifying it, but Dr. George, can that happen?
Yeah, I was gonna say something because the same thing happens to me. I take about 20 pills every morning, and I get very nauseated. And I've had to take the Zofran, which actually I take most days actually after I take my medications. But one of the things you could try is, I know that it may be a cumbersome kind of experiment, but you could try taking one type of pill at a time, and wait a little while between the pills and see which one gives you the problem. Again, it's going to take a few hours if you're on a lot of different medications. But if you take one pill and then, or you know, you could take the calcium and the potassium, and then wait a half an hour and see if that's the culprit. And by a process of elimination, you might be able to find out which one gives you the problem. But in my case, again, I'm on many different types of medications and supplements, and I take them all at the same time. So I just take the Zofran, and it works pretty well. And the calcium I take, instead of calcium, I take 2 Tums a day, which gives me 2,000 milligrams of calcium. And then I take 10,000 units of vitamin D. So for me, the calcium is very easy. I just take the 2 Tums. But you might try that if you have a lot of time.
Okay. I'll play around with it.
Let me just tell you something that I've started doing. So ever since I started treatment, I suffered from kind of morning sickness, and it was never bad, but it was always like there and thereabouts. I just always felt yucky, and I really didn't want to eat anything for the first couple of hours that I would get up. But my pattern was, I'd get up, I'd have a cup of coffee, I'd take my pills, and then I would feel crummy. And about 6 months ago, 3 months ago, I was talking to somebody, and they said, oh, you can't take those pills on an empty stomach. So I started eating, even though I didn't want anything, I made sure I ate something small, like a plain cookie or piece of bread or something when I took the pills first thing, and it certainly has helped me a lot. So I know this is a different situation because you had, you were retching. I mean, there's something that clearly upset you. But just in general, it's not a bad idea if you take pills first thing in the morning before you eat anything, just to take a little something with those pills before you sit down and have your first meal.
Yeah, I think I should go through each one of them and see, what their recommendation is. I take since my thyroid quit working, I take levothyroxine, and that has to be taken at least a half an hour before any food.
Mm-hmm.
So that one is on the other side. So yeah. They even say before taking any other pills also.
Okay. All right. Well, we've still got 15 minutes left. I want to touch base with George for his own issues, and I just want to welcome Jay Mills because I saw you came in. Did you need unfortunately you missed us talking about Mac Roach, but you will be able to hear that discussion if you come back on, listen when we put the recording up. It's probably at around the 90-minute mark. Dan and Gigi were just out from Newport, Rhode Island, meeting with Mac. They're a year into treatment with Mac. Did you have anything you wanted to raise?
No, not at present. I could ask one thing is that I had discussion of my
Hold on. Let's come back to you. I'll save you 2 or 3 minutes at the end. I want to just go back to. I want to go to Dr. George.
Okay.
You got the floor, George.
I don't need but a few minutes. All in all, I'm doing fairly well. I had an appointment with my oncologist a few weeks ago, and my PSA has been coming down. It had gone up since I had a biopsy in November, and we just watched it, and it came down. So I think it was 0.068 or something like that. So it's still well below 0.1. And I'm off the Firmagon and the Xtandi. I'm just on the Avodart estrogen patch and the metformin. And, the issue I've been having really is the opiate medication that I'm taking for my back. Because I had two pretty extensive back surgeries. And the last one was last July. I had a fusion of T11 to the sacrum because the first fusion had failed. The way I was diagnosed initially 3.5 years ago was I was having neurologic symptoms in my legs, and the MRI of my spine showed pretty much tumor throughout my spine, and at L3 it was compressing on my spinal cord. So I had to go in and get that taken out, and it left me with quite a bit of nerve pain in my left knee and my right foot. And like I said, I've been on opiates now almost 3.5 years. And the issue with me is I want to go to work. I want to go back to work as a physician. And it's been very, very difficult to come off of these things. I've managed to get off them. The problem is the pain comes back and I have to go back on them. But I have to do it again, and because my neurosurgeon thinks I can go back to work. And I'm still having a lot of side effects from the medications. Like you said, you take the amount of time you are on the anti-androgen, and you basically double that. So I'm still in that period where even though my testosterone is on the low normal side, I still have a lot of effects of low T, including depression. So, you know, I still get sweats. I mean, I've been off the Firmagon for 2 years almost, and I still get sweats at night and all those menopause symptoms. So the treatment has cured, you know, has just helped the patient, but the treatment unfortunately has left a lot of side effects. But I have no complaints about this because I mean I really, you know, when they caught it, it was pretty much everywhere in all my bones. I mean, it was in my ribs, my pelvis, my spine. And it had developed pretty rapidly because I had an MRI a year before, which was clean. So within a year, I got this cancer, and it just took off. It was a Gleason 8. So, but I am doing well. I still take a lot of medications. And I'm trying to cut down on those and, you know, deal with this depression. But if I get back to work, which I will, I hope to be back to work by July. I think I'll feel a lot better. I mean, there's nothing better than being around people and feeling like you have some worth, you know. Because this disease can make you feel hopeless, I'll tell you. You guys know.
George, are you possibly a candidate for an intrathecal pain pump?
Well, I don't think. I mean, the surgery's been done, and I don't think I'm at that point. But
it sounds like you are. I mean.
Yeah.
If the origin of the pain is low enough in your back, so I've been on an intrathecal pain pump for a year, just about a year now.
Oh, okay.
You know, I had not been able to write a science paper for 3 or 4 years, and I went on the pain pump. You know, the origin of the pain was a little bit different. I have pelvic pain syndrome from radiation damage for the most part.
Oh, okay.
I went on the pain pump, and within a month, my life was totally different. I was able to think again. I had been on high doses of narcotics, and I'm sorry, I'm getting tired here. It made a huge difference, and it might for you. I would definitely, you know, check it out with someone who knows more about it than I do. It's just, you know, do you know what it is?
Yeah, no, I've treated people with pumps, and it's probably not a big deal getting this done, right?
No, it's not. It's a 2-hour surgery to embed it under the skin, and you know, it requires 2 incisions, one for the pump itself and one to place the catheter in the intrathecal space, and then they sew you up again, and you know, and I walked out of the surgery, the post-op room within a couple of hours. So it's not a major issue to go through it. And then once you have it, you know, I need to return to the pain clinic to have it refilled with new drugs every 5 weeks. And that's a simple procedure. They, you know, inject through a port in the pump and through your skin and take out whatever's left from the last 5 weeks and put in new drugs, and you're off and running again. I guess the important thing is it really did change my life. It made it so much better than what it had been.
And Bill, and you're using a fraction of the opioid that you were using when you were taking it systemically, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, the amount of opiate that that's required to mitigate this pain is about 1/10 of what I was taking. And so all the side effects of taking large doses of opiates are gone. I don't need to worry about becoming resistant to the effects of these drugs, which was a big concern. So I can't say enough about how much it's helped me. I don't know. I think you would need to talk to an expert to see if you're a candidate. I think the biggest factor is where the pain is originating from. If it's too high in your spine, then it might not work. But if it's low enough, it would definitely work.
Yeah, it's at L3. Just based on where the symptoms are in my legs. That's an interesting idea. And you have no side effects, and cognitive, you feel fine?
No side effects. Cognitively, I am far better than I was. As I said, I could not, I would try to read a science paper, and I get to the second paragraph and I completely forget what was in the first paragraph.
Absolutely.
And now I can read the science literature again. I can write papers. I've written and published 2 papers in the last year after the pump was installed, and I hadn't published anything for the previous 3 or 4 years.
Bill, this is Jake. I have probably a stupid question, but what does intrathecal mean? What space is that?
It's the space in your spine where the drugs are delivered, and where the nerves are that are causing the problems.
Okay.
And so that's basically the answer.
So, there's no risk of paralysis when they're fiddling around with your spine like that?
No, I don't. I've never read that was an issue, and I've read a lot about it.
Okay. I was just curious. Thank you.
I really thank you for that, because I haven't thought of that. But I know I'm not going back on the narcotics. I'm just not. It's been a hell of a ride, and as you know, of course, I'm on 400 or 500 milligrams of oxycodone, which probably kill most people. And the tolerance really has just developed to the point where I still have pain. So
yeah, that's exactly what I was concerned about. Yeah. Oh boy, George, you should check it out. I think it really could potentially help you enormously. The other big issue that I have, because of radiation damage, is chronic constipation. And that was horribly exacerbated by the large doses of narcotics. I was, every couple of months I was in the ER with a bowel impaction. And that's not, the drugs don't reach those receptors on the intestines that cause that problem. So it went away.
Wow. Could maybe Rick could send me your info and I could talk to you on the phone and
sure,
get some more information.
Yeah,
I'll do it right after. I have a question for you. Are you doing any exercise? Did you get that exercise bike, Xavier?
I'm still looking for it. I'm dealing with flooding. I'm dealing with flooding issues in my basement right now. I can't even I don't even have a place to put it.
Look,
no, I try outside now.
If I remember, Rhode Island is one of the smallest states in the Union. Isn't that true?
It is the smallest state.
It is the smallest state. Now, we have Dan Roten on the telephone, who can't live too far away from you, who I have the same conversation with as I'm having with you. I can't get him to exercise, and I can't get you to exercise. So what if the two of you linked up as exercise buddies?
We have to go now.
Oh, is this the one guy from Newport?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, all right.
So I think that I'll send you two information about each other, and maybe we can create some exercise buddies here, and the two of you would motivate each other to do a little bit of exercise together.
That would be great. Oh my gosh.
That sounds good.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
Dan's really motivated. He just has like lots of excuses. Good excuses.
We die of a car accident versus the prostate cancer, right?
Yeah.
Graphic.
I believe it.
Oh, okay. Where are you in Rhode Island? I don't even know that.
I'm in Cumberland.
Oh,
I know, yeah.
you're far away.
Yeah, that's like a different state.
Oh yeah, you must be from Rhode Island.
We're from McQuidnick Island. People.
Yeah, but I'm saying you must be from Rhode Island if you said that.
Yes, that's
Because
right.
usually, from Cumberland to Providence, it's a day trip, but in real life, it only takes 19 minutes by car.
Is that right? Are you sure?
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to work there.
What?
All right. So
George, I'm curious. What kind of a physician are you?
ER physician.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I take care of all the fecal impactions.
Oh, I bet that's a lot of fun.
It actually is. It's actually one of the few things that you can actually make a person go home with a smile.
Oh boy, do I know that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see the results immediately, right?
Or George, the other side of that coin is what happened to my sister about 3 months ago, where the impaction that she had ruptured her colon and she finished up with a bag. So then it's not so good.
Did she have a nurse do it with long fingernails?
I don't know. Anyway,
I had one experience where I was impacted, but then it finally just all of a sudden let go in the exam room in the radiology in the radiation medicine department. And I grew up on farms. I never saw as much cow shit come out of a cow. It was all over that room.
Thank you for that, Professor.
You're welcome.
Before we finish, Jay Mills has got a quick question. We'll answer that and then we'll finish up. Jay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I've been looking at radiation, but then someone suggested that I had a median lobe that was large and would cause worse symptoms after brachytherapy, and that I might consider surgery for that reason. And I was curious about Stone had an article that showed that people with the IPSS scores that are low tended to have worse symptoms because they're used to not having any symptoms. But the people with moderate symptoms tended to return to their baseline. People with bad symptoms, say 15 to 20, would actually after brachytherapy would actually be better off than they were before. And my symptoms are somewhere in the middle, so I figured I'd return to baseline, but it didn't say anything about median lobe. Does anybody know about a median lobe? This is where it domes up into the prostate and can hook over the urethra. Okay. I've got a question. I've reaching out to two or three doctors and asking them this question to see.
I think it's so technical that you're really going to have to talked to some docs that have experience in treating men where the tumor is pushed up into the bladder neck.
Yep.
And as we discussed, I think you've got to ask them. I mean, has anybody on this call had issues where the tumor, I mean, we do have people, I can think of 2 or 3, I don't think they're on the call today, but has anybody on this call had issues where the tumor was bulging into the bladder neck?
Okay.
No.
Okay. Yeah, and with mine, it's I've got the tumor is there at the bladder neck, but then the medial lobe is just hyperplasia, and it's what's arching up into the bladder. So
Okay. I think, you know, it's one of those questions where you're just going to have to find somebody. And I mean, Peter Kafka, I know, had issues. Rob, I think, had issues around the bladder neck. But I think, you know, it's like I say, it's so technical. You really need to talk to the docs and ask them what the experience is and whether brachytherapy is going to work or not. But it sounds like you found a pretty good article there.
Yeah.
So you know, which is commendable. So what do you draw from that article, that in your case brachytherapy would be a possibility, an option?
The brachytherapy may be, or that my urinary symptoms might get worse. How much worse, I don't know if I did brachytherapy. And that's for that reason, surgery all of a sudden may look more attractive, whereas before it didn't.
Okay.
And and that was, but thank you for letting me ask the question. I'll let you know what I find out from the doctors.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Mac is probably a really good person to ask that question if you can, you know, get a good answer out of him. As Dan and Gigi know, sometimes he doesn't answer all the questions. It's probably better to send him one question at a time, and, you know, space them out day by day, and then, you know, maybe, I don't know.
Is it tumor that's pushing into the bladder neck, or you said something about hyperplastic cells?
Tumor is pressing it at the bladder neck and maybe putting some pressure there, but then there is hyperplastic arching up, making a cone shape into the bladder. That's a good, I'm not sure how big it is. It's about 1/3 of the height of my bladder, of my prostate rather. And it goes well into the, pushes deep into the.
Okay, so I'm thinking, you know, hyperplasia is basically what BPH is all about.
Right.
Benign prostatic hyperplasia.
Right.
And there are drugs to treat that. I wonder if they might be helpful here.
Yeah, I wonder if
not just with a tumor, but with, you know, hyperplasia cells that are not tumor cells.
Yeah, the Flomax and ADT might both shrink it, and then if it is brachytherapy, once it's shrunk, perhaps it would not. It would actually be less of an issue, and that's one of my questions.
Okay, I mean, have you talked to doctor? It seems like that, you know, those drugs designed for BPH, it seems like might help.
I was just going to say the drugs that you want to talk about are finasteride, is really finasteride or dutasteride, probably finasteride, which is also Avodart, which is a 5-alpha reductase family drug. So it might just be worth asking somebody like Peter Carroll whether he thinks that might help you with, or Mac, whether they think that it would help you prior to brachytherapy.
Yeah, I will.
All right, guys, we're going to, we're not going to do the same as last week. We are going to finish pretty much on time, and hopefully Jake's been recording this, so hopefully we'll get it up and posted either tonight or tomorrow morning. And Jay, you might want to listen to the discussion, as I said, around Mac, and also the excellent discussion about Bill, although hopefully it doesn't impact you, but it was very interesting about Professor Bill's treatment and the trial that he's considering, which we spent the first 40 minutes talking about. So I'll say good night to everybody. Next meeting is next Monday. Don't forget, we have an inner conversation call tomorrow at 8 o'clock Eastern time, and encourage everybody and anybody to join that. If you have any other friends who have any type of cancer, and they are dealing with issues which are not technical issues, but in their spirit, in their in their mind, it is a really, really good call. Who's moderating that tomorrow night, Jake?
Yours truly, me.
Oh, it will be an excellent call. It will be an excellent call. So
thank you, Rick. The check is in the mail.
Thank you. And we'd like to see some men with different cancers on that call as well.
Yeah.
So that would be great. And then Thursday there's a breast cancer call, and then we're into the following week. So I hope that whoever has extreme weather, it tempers and goes towards the norm. And we'll speak to you next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Rick. Good night, everybody.